Okay, so we are going to look at some vocabulary for this unit of rates, ratios, and proportions. So let's just quickly talk about some of the vocab. A lot of this you already know. Okay, a ratio is a blank of two numbers. Okay, a ratio is a comparison of two numbers. We talked about that a little bit before. There we go, a comparison of two numbers. Ratios can be blank to blank or blank to blank. So we're talking about the kinds of things that they're comparing. I wonder if you can remember what that is. All right. Ratios can be part to part. So we're comparing the two things, or it could be part to whole. Okay. There we go. Ratios have the same, I'm just going to go ahead and give you this one, unit. A unit is how we count something. So maybe we're counting dollars, or maybe we're counting animals, or maybe we're counting cups of coffee, okay? But we're comparing two different amounts of the same thing. Now, a rate, that's a new vocab word. A rate basically looks like a ratio, kind of is a ratio, but it has different units. So this is when we're comparing two different things, okay? So we're comparing different amounts of two different things. For instance, it might be how many dollars are we spending on this many burritos? So dollars and burritos are not the same unit, right? Or maybe we're saying how many feet of lumber do we need for each project? Projects and feet of lumber are different units, okay? Ratios and rates can be blank to lowest terms. It works like blank fractions. Okay. They can be simplified. And what does that mean exactly? Well, it basically means that it's kind of like when we reduced fractions. Okay. And finally, unit rates are rates that compare units of one thing to one unit of another thing. So maybe we say for $10 we can get 5 cups of coffee. A unit rate would say, well, how much is 1 cup of coffee? Or maybe we say we drove 120 miles in 2 hours. The unit rate would be how many miles did we drive in 1 hour? Okay, so unit rates basically when we take a rate and we simplify or reduce it so that the one of the amounts is a 1. Okay, let's move on. Let's just kind of review some ratios, rates, unit rates, etc. So if we're looking at a ratio, we have 8 cats and 20 dogs. What would be a part-to-part ratio? Okay, a part-to-part ratio for 8 cats and 20 dogs would be 8. I'm going to do it in a fraction form. Of course, we remember that we can do it in fraction form or with colons, right? So I just as easily could write 8 to 20. And I can also use the word 2, 8 to 20. Okay, so part to part. We have 8 cats and 20 dogs. Now I'm going to ask you, can we simplify that? If I asked you to simplify that ratio, how low could you go? Okay, so if we want to simplify this ratio, what can we divide both of those numbers by? Well, you could say 2. right? So you could say 2. Let's divide both of them by 2. We would end up with 4/10. Well, that's not all the way reduced either. Look, we can do 2 again. Divide by 2 again. And now we're going to get 2/5. And that would be where we were done. Okay? So that absolutely works. If you don't know what the greatest common factor is and you want to just keep dividing by 2s and 3s until you're done, that is perfectly fine. Of course, there is a quicker way. And you will get the same answer. And that is that we are just going to divide by 4. So you always want to try to think of the biggest number that goes into both of those. And when I divide by 4, I'm going to end up with 2/5. So that would be my simplified answer. Okay? What if I said, can you make a part to whole ratio? Okay. So part to whole, let's talk about the cats. Part to whole would be, I have 8 cats, and how many animals do I have all together, right? Because the whole would be everybody, all the animals that we have. And if you add 8 cats and 20 dogs, you end up with 28. I should use a different color since, okay. Now, can we simplify that part to whole ratio? What would we end up with? Okay, we are going to, once again, we can divide both of those numbers by 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. And 28 divided by 4 is 7. So that would be the simplified version of that ratio. Okay. I want to remind you that a ratio is when we're comparing 2 of the same thing. Well, you might say cats and dogs are different. Yes, but the unit is animals, right? We're just counting animals, right? Okay. So the unit here is animals. Okay. Go ahead. Let's look at rates. So I have 6 kids and 20 pieces of pizza. Can you make a part-to-part rate? All right. I have 6 kids. And again, I tend to make my ratios and proportions and rates into fractions because I find it easier to reduce that way. And it's also easier when we're finding proportions. I'll teach you a little trick when we get there. Okay. So here we go. This is part to part. 6 kids and 20 pieces of pizza. Can we simplify that? And if so, how low can you go? All right, well, we can simplify that. We can divide both of these numbers by 2. Works just like reducing fractions, right? So our final answer there is going to be 6 divided by 2 is 3. 20 divided by 2 is 10. And that is our simplified rate. Okay? Let me ask you a question. Could you make a part to whole rate? Well, the answer is no. And that is because we can't say 6 kids to 26 kid pizzas or pizza kids or pieces of kids, right? They're not the same thing. So there really isn't, we can't really take it as a whole. So when you have a rate, you can only make part to part rates. The units that we're looking at here are kids and pieces of pizza. Those are the units. Numbers of kids and numbers of pieces of pizza. Okay. Let's look at another one. What happened to my little arrow guide? There it is. Okay. Here we go. So now we're talking about the unit rate. Remember that a unit rate is when we're comparing, a rate, of course, is when we're comparing two different units. So here we have miles and gallons of gas. Okay, those are two very different things. Miles is a distance and gallons of gas is like the volume of something, right? Those are very different. So we're going to have the unit rate. And what that means is we want to get it down to so that we have how many miles can we go on 1 gallon of gas. That's what a unit rate would tell us. Okay. So let's go ahead and start with a, just make a good old part-to-part rate. Okay. So I bet that was easy for you. And you have a nice part-to-part rate. And on top you have 120. And on the bottom you have 5. Okay. So what I want is for the bottom to be a 1. So your job is to figure out how can we make basically an equivalent fraction, right? It's very much like that process. So what number do you think would go on top? All right. I hope that you saw this. How did we get from 5 to 1? Remember, when we're finding equivalent fractions or when we're finding unit rates, we're always multiplying and dividing. So you might say, oh, I minus 4. That's never going to happen when we're doing this kind of math, okay? So let's ask what we divided by. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So whatever we do to the bottom, we got to do to the top. Okay, so 120, 5 goes into 100 20 times, and it goes into 20 4 times. So our answer there is 24. So the answer to the question is, how far can I go on 5 gallons of gas? I can go 24 miles. Pretty important to know what we're talking about here. Okay, and what are the units? Our units are miles and gallons. Okay, those are different. That's why it's a rate. Okay, we're going to do one more little practice thing here. And we're going to go ahead and make some, going to go ahead and make some ratios and rates. So my first question for you is, when we're looking at this, $16 for 8 coffees. Is that a ratio or a rate? $16 for 8 coffees. Are the units the same or different? Okay, $16 for 8 coffee. Our units are dollars and coffees. Those are different. So this is a rate. Okay, so let's go ahead and make a rate. And then I would like you to see if you can do a unit rate. Okay, so our initial rate is going to be 16 to 8. Okay, and if I want a unit rate, remember, I want the bottom number to be a 1. Okay, so what did I do to get from an 8 to a 1? What did I multiply or divide by? Okay, so we divided by 8 on the bottom, and that means we're going to divide by 8 on the top. And our top number is going to be 16 divided by 8 is 2. So that tells me that the unit rate is, I can spend $2 for 1 coffee. All right, let's look at the next one. Somebody traveled 105 miles in 3 hours. 105 miles in 3 hours. So what I'd like you to do is just let's start with a rate and then see if you can get it to a unit rate. And I will remind you that your unit rate will have a 1 on the bottom. Okay, so we're starting with 105 miles and we're starting with 3 hours. Okay, so how did we get from 3 to 1? We divided by 3. Whatever we do to the bottom, got to do to the top. Okay, 105 divided by 3 is 35. And so what that tells us is we can go 35 miles in 1 hour. Okay, let's look at the next one. Oh, I forgot to ask you, is that a rate or a ratio? 105 miles to 3 hours, rate or ratio? It is a rate. Obviously, if we can find the unit rate, it must be a rate, right? The reason it's a rate, of course, is because miles and hours are different units. So we are calling that a rate. Okay, we've got 4 more problems to do here. 21 adults to 15 children. Can you please set up a rate or ratio, whichever one it is, and then see if you can simplify it. Okay, so 21 adults to 15 children. So my first question for you is this a ratio or a rate? This is a ratio because we're counting people. Our unit is people, right? So let's go ahead and see if we can simplify this ratio that we have. All right, I know that I can divide both of these by 3, which leaves me with 7 and 5. Again, always label so that you know what the 7 and the 5 stand for. So we have 7 adults to every 5 children. All right. 9 pounds of apples for 6 people. First question, ratio or rate? This is a rate. Okay, that is a rate because pounds and people are totally different units. All right, so let's go ahead and see if you can set up a rate, and then let's see if you can get it to a simplified rate. All right, so we started with 9 pounds of apples for 6 people. Can we simplify that a little bit? Yes, we can. We can divide it by 3. And we can get 3 over 2. Okay, and again, what are our units here? Well, it would be 3 pounds of apples for 2 people. Okay, so now I've got a question for you. Could I make a unit rate out of this? So in other words, could I make a rate where the bottom is 1? Yes or no? Yeah, I could. I'm not going to end up with an integer on the top, obviously, because 3, what we're going to have to divide by is a 2 here, because 2 divided by 2 is 1. And can we divide 3 by 2? Sure we can. It doesn't come out even, but we can do it. So 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. So what that means is each person is going to have 1.5 pounds of apple. So we can do a unit rate for that. All right, let's look at the next one. Are we looking at a rate or a ratio? We are looking at a ratio. You might say pencils and markers are different. Yeah, but we're counting them, aren't we? We're not talking about feet and dollars and gallons and all those different kind of units. So when we're talking about counting pencils and markers, we can say that the unit is just one single writing utensil. Okay? So if we set up our initial rate, we have 10 pencils for 3 markers. Go ahead and simplify that. Can we simplify it? No. It's a ratio. So we're not going to make like a unit rate out of this. Can we simplify 10 and 3? No, we cannot. So that would be our final simplification in this case. Okay? Last one. Ratio or rate. We're talking about 54 yards of fabric to make 18 dresses. Ratio or rate? That is a rate because we're talking about 2 different units of measure. We're talking about dresses, so we're counting dresses, and then we're the unit of measurement for the fabric is yards. So those are different. Okay, go ahead and set up a rate and then see if you can figure out the unit rate as well. All right, we have 54 yards and we have 18 dresses. So the unit rate would tell us how much fabric do we need for one dress. Okay, and we have to divide by 18. We're going to divide both of these by 18. And our answer is 3. Again, always remember what you're talking about here. So this would be 3 yards for one dress. Okay. There you go. So I hope that's helpful. I'm just going to have you do this Ed puzzle today. Let it sink in a little bit. I have one little worksheet for you, and that's all you have to do today. Okay? So I hope you have a great day. And let me know if any of this doesn't make sense or if you need any help with anything, and I would be happy to assist you.